So today seemed to be not only the day of Lucknow, but also a day of Lamartine College with three of our panelists from this great institution of nurturing. For this session of Military Lit Fest Lucknow, I welcome all of you, especially our esteemed guests for today, that is Mukul Deva and Colonel Nilesh Kunwar. Mukul is an all-rounder of great caliber, having achieved so much in life, including penning down 18 books. Nilesh will be engaging him. Nilesh is a third generation officer from 311 GR, and his fourth generation is also in the military. He is known for his Kashmir watching, and he's a writer on security issues. Often we read his incisive research-based articles, which are very timely. He has served extensively in militancy areas of Jammu and Kashmir and Northeast. Over to you, Nilesh.
Thank you, Hemant, and welcome to all of you. Hi, Mukul, how are you?
Hi, sir. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, sir.
Well, gentlemen, today we come on to the next part of our discussion, that is interaction with Mukul Deva, who doesn't actually need any introduction. However, since this newly created sort of platform of webinar seems to have a protocol that the guest speaker must be introduced, I will just say a few words. And since his achievements are so many, I have no choice but to refer to my notes at times. Mukul is an alumni of Lamartine Lucknow. Did his training at the National Defence Academy, Pune, followed by the Indian Military Academy, Dehradun, and then joined the prestigious Sikh Light Infantry in 1981. He served for nearly 15 years before he decided to quit the army, probably, I think, because he had seen all it had to offer in terms of combat action. In that, he has seen live combat action both in India, that is in the Sechin Glacier, as well as in Sri Lanka as part of the Indian peacekeeping force. Having left the army, he turned entrepreneur and started a security agency, which is highly successful. Thereafter, he also delved into writing, and presently he's settled in Singapore. He is the founding, like I said before, he's the founding director of the MSD Security Private Limited in India and the Influence Solutions Private Limited in Singapore. Mukul also has the distinction of being a mentor for the research, for the Afghanistan Fellowship Program, which is a program conducted under the aegis of the United Nations Institute of Training, or UNITA. And he's also associate coach with Singapore Civil Services College. Now, coming to the interaction, I propose to conduct it in three parts. Like, firstly, we'll talk to Mukul the soldier. Thereafter, we'll hear Mukul the entrepreneur. And lastly, we will meet Mukul the writer. So without any wasting any more time, I will come to the first part, that is Mukul the soldier. Now, Mukul, could you give our viewers a brief rundown on your military career? With a specific reference to how it helped you in shaping your future, both as a successful entrepreneur and a prolific writer of great repute.
Thank you, sir. Before I answer that, I'd like to thank all of you all for having me over. And I also wanted to say something about this introduction which Colonel Nilesh has given. And there are two things, Firstly, this kind of an introduction builds a lot of pressure. I mean, now I have to live up to stuff, right? But the flip side is that it also helps the audience to realize that I'm not just a pretty face, which is kind of also nice to be in. So coming down to the question which he asked, a brief rundown of my career. I don't want to bore you guys. Just suffice it to say that I was a very average cadet, very average. I had the honor of staying back for retests every single year, twice. So, and what changed my life probably was the fact that I happened to land up in what I would call the finest regiment in the Indian Army, which is, and luckily the 14th Battalion is literally the tip of the spear. So that kind of shaped me. And I had the fortune of working with some amazing officers. So whether we started with Gwalior, then Delhi, when Mrs. Gandhi was killed, we were doing internal security duties. Then moved on to Ladakh, then to Siachen, Hyderabad, Sri Lanka, Nagaland, Arunachal, the usual stuff, So, and during this time, yes, one had the misfortune of seeing quite a fair bit of combat. I call it a misfortune because those who have seen combat realize that there is nothing good about it. It's a very brutal way to live life. But the other flip side is that the one thing about combat which I learned is that it brings out the worst and the best in human beings. It brings out the completely the beast inside the man, and it also brings out the hero inside the man. So I had the misfortune of seeing both, and that's about my career. And just one incident which kind of sticks in my head, and I thought it's funny, so I'll mention it. There were three of us subalterns in 14th Sikhalai, and I don't know why, but one of us suggested that all of us should shave our heads. So we shaved our heads. The next day we were deployed in combat. 2 years later, the three of us again decided to shave our heads. And again, the next day we were deployed in combat. So that time the commanding officer called us and said, if any of you buggers ever decide to shave your head again, I will personally shoot you. So that kind of stuck in my mind, I've never shaved my head after that. And another incident which kind of sticks into my head is I was posted in Srinagar in a headquarters there. And one day I was floating around, and I was a young officer, the captain, And a brigadier who happened to be passing by called me. He said, "What are you doing?" So, I mean, captains don't have much work in a corps headquarters, We kind of do whatever everyone tells us to do. So he said, "Come with me." And he took me to his office, and there was a Panditji sitting there. He said, "He will read your hand." So this guy, I mean, I'm not a big fan of people reading my hand, but, when a brigadier tells you to get your hand read, you get it read. So I gave him my hand, and he read it, and he said, "You will rise to great heights." So that finished, and I went back to my office, and there was my posting order was waiting for Siachen Glacier. I went back looking for the Panditji, and I must tell you that guy is lucky I never found him again, because moving from Siachen from Sri Lanka, from Srinagar to Siachen was not funny. So anyway, that kind of encapsulates my military career. And the second part of the question was very interesting for me, which Colonel Nilesh asked, that what did I learn? I would say that I learned three things from the army, which kind of held me in good stead. And they were focus, flexibility, and discipline. As a combat soldier, in fact, as anything you do in the army, right? The first thing they teach you is to stay focused on the goal. The second thing they teach you is that no plan will ever work. So you must be flexible about how you get to the goal. And the third thing they teach you is the discipline, right? So discipline is so important, because if you have discipline, you do not need motivation. It will just make you do whatever it is that life needs you to do. So these were the three things I picked up from my tenure in the army. And I must say I have applied them as an entrepreneur, as an executive coach, as a mentor, as a writer, in every area of my life. So does that answer your question, sir?
It does, Mukul. But it raises another question associated with it. And that is that, you talked about discipline, and I do agree that the army teaches you you pick up a lot of sterling qualities like loyalty, self-discipline, faithfulness. But at the same time, there is a school of thought, which says that the army is, teaches you to become inflexible. Though you said it taught you flexibility. To quote, like in the words of Lord Tennyson, the army teaches you there's not to make reply, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. Now, with this background, I would like to ask you that how did army training make you the person you are today as an entrepreneur and as a writer, as a very, very versatile person?
I think it's a good question. And I would say that I'm not sure whether Tennyson actually served in the army, but he should have. Because he would have realized that most of us who have had the honor of wearing the uniform, just look back at what we are trained for, right? We are trained to take decisions in the split second, literally. You take a decision based on very incomplete information, very contradictory information, and you take it knowing that if you get it wrong, someone will die. But you take the decision and you move forward with the confidence of knowing that whatever the plan was, which was given to you, is not going to work. So you adapt and you adapt and you adapt. The funny thing is, most army officers do not see how flexible they really are. They do not realize that the fundamentals which are taught to us in the military are so strong that you can take them to any walk of life and apply them. I'll give you a very interesting example. I mean, when I joined NDA, I was a terrible student in the 10th grade. Anyone from Lomatnias will tell you that. I was a horrible student. I remember once I had the honor of getting 3 out of 100 in maths. And in fact, when I released I think it was my 5th book, and I was in Lucknow for the book launch. And I remember my English teacher, who was then the principal, and he looked at me and he said, "Deva, you bugger, when did you learn to write?" I said, "Sir, aap hi ne bola tha, learn to read or write." So I learned how to write. So I was a bad student. And then I land up in the army, and I quit the army and I start off my own company. I didn't know anything about business. What I do knew was that any organization which has robust processes, strong procedures, clarity in the way you communicate the aim to the people you bring in, and if you're able to maintain the morale of those people, you cannot fail. So I literally applied the principles of war. I mean, if you walk into my office in my India company, it is exactly run like a military unit. There is no distinction. So that's the point I wish to make, that everything which we require to succeed in any walk of life is already there. It's foundation. You cannot go through 3 years of NDA and not get this thing sorted out. You cannot go through regimental life and not have it sorted out. I wonder if that answers your question, sir.
No, it does. It does. From here, get a good sense of what you have said, and I would like to add for the audience that probably this thought just came to me. It never struck me in its totality till now, but during this discussion, the thought which has come to my mind is that, see, in the civil sector, your motivation, the aim of you have to motivate a man to be productive and to be more productive. But in the armed forces, you have to motivate your subordinate to unhesitatingly, unquestioningly lay down his life. And probably that's where I feel that my earlier question, which was talking about the inflexibility in the army, actually was not, I would say, correctly framed, because the army, in fact, teaches you a lot of flexibility with a lot of scope for taking decisions. Like you said, split decisions on the spur of the moment, knowing very well that if it goes wrong, it's going to cost, not in terms of loss of money, but loss of blood and lives. Thank you very much. That's a good question. Now let's come to part 2. That is Mukul, the entrepreneur. Now you have said it. You preempted my question by saying that you had no idea. When you joined the CV street, of what was there in store for you. Now, how I see it, maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm so. Otherwise, to answer the question about that, you say you took to the field of security management, and that was, I think, a very wise decision, because you having with your combat experience, regimental life, and other engagements in the army, you were well versed in security, all security related issues. So that was certainly a very a big plus point. However, see, you joined at a time when there was a even more menacing negative, and that was that during the 90s, the security management industry was bursting at its seams, and you would have been pitted against very, very well established and renowned such agencies. So could you tell us as to how did you manage to make a mark for yourself and come out on tops in this field?
Well, actually, sir, the answer is a lot simpler than we see it from the surface. What happened is that when I left, right, I did not want to give myself any additional disadvantages. So staying with security was a conscious choice because it was known terrain for me. Despite the fact that the market was saturated, I do believe that I had one edge. I'm from a very middle class family background, and I did not have deep pockets. In fact, at the time when I left, I still remember I had like $800 in the bank. And I was a single parent. My children were very small then. So I did not, for me, the one defining thing was that I did not have the luxury to fail. It was as simple as that. I knew that whatever I do, I will have to make it work. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this one story, when, yeah, I'm forgetting the guy's name, but when he was conquering some part in South America, and there was this part where he had sailed for like 2 years, and his men were tired, his horses were tired, he was really in a mess. And he landed on the shores, and there was a native army of a few thousand waiting for him. And he knew that he needed to do something to motivate his people, right? So he said three words which changed the course of the battle for his men. He said, burn the boats. So he set fire to his own ships. Now the men knew that there was no way back, that the only way they were coming out of it alive was to get the upper hand on the enemy they were facing. So I was in a kind of a similar situation. My back was to the wall. I did not have the financial resources. I was clear that I did not want to work for anyone else again in my life. And so I just knew I had to make it work. And that's what I did. I literally put everything I had learned from the army, applied the systems, the processes, and I went at it with no ambiguity that I would make it work. So it sounds, I don't know whether it kind of answers your question, but that's the honest answer.
Okay, it does. It does. In this widely acclaimed book, Striptease: The Art of Corporate Warfare, you have applied the principles of war which are studied by military people of the armed forces throughout the world, and you have been able to convert it into a corporate set of corporate guidelines. My question is that how did you get the idea of finding congruence in matters military and business or commerce? That is a point I would like for you to dwell with some detail, because it will help a lot of us to understand the nuances, the similarity between corporate life and the life in armed forces.
Right. So, I mean, firstly, right, let's understand that this idea was not new. It was not unique. If you go back to like 328 BC, right, when Philip of Macedonia, that's Alexander the Great's father, when he set up his leadership academies, whatever they were learning there in the armies of the world, not just the Greek army, it was Roman, Egypt, it doesn't matter which country. Whatever they were learning, the corporates were trying to follow. Everything which is taught in the corporate world in terms of leadership is taken out from the army. They are the lessons. So, for example, I don't know whether you're aware, but in Vietnam, the generals used to have this regular meeting. They brought in a whole load of Vietnamese generals. They were pulled out and brought into business. Now, that did not work quite so well because they forgot some fundamentals, but I don't want to go into that. What I do want to talk about is that because everything in the corporate world, as far as leadership and management is concerned, comes from the army, it is a very natural congruence. Now, you take any principle of war. Let's take the first one, selection and maintenance of aim. Isn't that what we do in the corporates? We select a target, we select a quarterly target, an annual target, a 5-year target, and then we deploy our resources according to the targets we wish to achieve. So whatever was taught there, I had done it, I had applied it, and it had worked very well for my company. Just to give you an example, my chartered accountant was horrified at the progress we made. He was wondering, what are you guys doing? Because we had projections and we were outperforming our projections by a factor of 2 to 3 every single year for 10 years on the trot. And this is without anything other than applying the principles of law. So when I saw that it had worked very well for me, I thought it made sense to kind of put it across. And I chose a slightly different angle because I believe that success is good, but it doesn't teach us anything. So I decided that in striptease, I would focus on failures. Whenever a principle of war had been violated, how it had led to disaster. So striptease, I have 10 principles of war, and I have focused on 10 major failures which have happened and how they apply to the corporate sector with very specific examples. I don't want to spoil it because I'm hoping that you guys will buy the book and read it. So that's why I'm not giving very specific examples, right? By the way, even if you don't read it, do buy it. Okay, I only get paid on the buy.
Exactly. Okay, now very well said. But I would just request you that without taking the, I would say the thunder out of your book, could you just give a small example so that I am giving you a forum or a platform to advertise your book. Take it that way, and let us have something so that we can, a small anything which you feel will, sort of, interest us.
Sure. I mean, I can give you two very, very, very simple examples which are known, very widely known. The first was when, there was a time when the American car industry was very big and Volkswagen had entered the market and they decided that they would make cars meeting all different categories of cars, like entry level, mid level, luxury level. There was also the time when Rolls-Royce did an interesting survey about coming out with the cheaper version. And they were shocked when they realized that the Rolls-Royce owners said that if you do come out with the cheaper version, we will not buy the Rolls-Royce anymore because it takes away the status symbol. Similarly, when Volkswagen tried to enter different car segments, it lost market share hugely. Another example is, you take the case of Gillette razors. Now, they do something very simple. They don't wait for the enemy to attack them, which is they do not wait for other razor manufacturers to come up with better products. They work on systematically making their own products obsolete. So the Mac 1 was replaced by the Mac 2, the Mac 2 by the Mac 3. So it gives the enemy a shifting target. Now imagine if I'm competing with Gillette, while I'm figuring out the answer to Mac 2, they bought in Mac 3 and Mac 4. So I have to re-gear every time. Right? So there are many such examples. There is another very interesting example closer home. I wonder if you guys remember there was a car called the Fiat Palio, which was launched in India quite some years back. And, it had been the best-selling car in Europe for like 4 or 5 years. And when it was launched in India, it did amazingly well. But what a lot of people don't realize is that at that point in time, the CEO actually was asked to leave because he had not catered for the contingency that the car would do so well. So they were not able to bring the production up to match the demand. Now, we all know how the Indian market works. There is a new car model releasing literally every week, at least in those years it was. So by the time Fiat caught up with the production line, the car was no longer today's news. It was already last year's news. So there are many such examples of corporate failures where egos did not allow them to admit that the plan hadn't worked. So they kept reinforcing failure, which any military officer will tell you is not an intelligent thing to do. Right? So does that kind of give you an overview?
Yeah, it does. Yes, it does. That is what I'm saying, that Mukul, even if please don't be, shackled by the idea that we would be, that to express your views would be taken as blowing a trumpet, because we do require such things to make our sort of interaction for the people, for the viewers, more, illuminating for them. So now that brings to the next question, is that as a motivational speaker, you have read, heard, and spoken a lot. You have analyzed cases, issues, or probably you had the, good fortune of meeting or knowing individuals or corporate houses, which were totally devastated, but yet were able to, through their resilience or through whatever you may say, were able to rebound. And why I'm asking this question today is that due to COVID-19, a lot of people have taken it on the chin, and there are a lot of people who are, a former shadow of themselves, because they were not, I would say, speculating. They were hard working and very, very sort of, balanced personalities. But this pandemic rather, has really thrown life out of gear. So anything which could motivate our listeners would be most welcome.
A fair question, and I'll answer it in two parts, right? The first is I want to share with you the story of a very amazing person whom I had the honor of coaching. So this lady is early 40s, very smart. She had just been promoted to take on the role of the senior most person handling new product launches by a multinational. Now, because of her promotion, I was asked to provide her coaching support. That's normal for our company, has been retained by their company to do this. So the first time when I met this lady, I always spend some time getting to know the person I'm working with. And I was amazed to find out that this lady, whenever she talked about herself, she would use two words: introvert and pessimist. And she would always use them in tandem. She would always, like, if she used one, the other would follow immediately. So when she did it about 3 or 4 times, so I asked her, I said, tell me, why do you refer to yourself as an introvert and a pessimist in the same breath? What does it mean for you? She said, Mukul, isn't it like that? I said, well, not for me. I mean, I'm an introvert, but I'm definitely not a pessimist. So why do you do that? So we actually talked a little more, and she identified 3 qualities in herself, 3 things which she was doing, which made her believe that she was an introvert and a pessimist. She said, Mukul, I like silence. That was the first one. Second thing she said, I plan all the time. And the third thing she said is, I see the downside of everything. So it was these 3 qualities or 3 things which she was doing, which made her believe that she was an introverted pessimist. So obviously my next question to her was, are you happy with it, or do you want to do something about it? She said, no. I mean, if I don't need to put in too much of work, I would be happy to look at it. I said, okay. So let's take these 3 things which you do, and I will give you you tell me which one you want to work on. So the first one was, I like silence. She said, no. Immediately she said, no, Mukul, I'm married to a guy who talks as much as you do, so leave this one alone. Fair enough. The second thing, I plan for the future all the time. She said, yeah, this guy I'm married to, he's a very live in the moment guy. So I'm the one who has to do all the planning for the family. So I think that quality is working very well for me. And even at work, because I'm in charge of new product launches, I need to do a lot of planning. So we said, okay, let's leave that alone. Now we were left with the third sentence. I look at the downside of everything. So I asked her, I said, tell me, if I gave you the privilege of changing any one word in this sentence, I look at the downside of everything, which word would you change? Now, before I share her answer, would anyone like to guess which word she changed? No one? You can put it in chat, if you're feeling shy about talking, you can put it in chat. Which word do you think she changed? I always look at the downside of everything. Okay, guys, we are not going to shoot you if you get it wrong. Okay, Shakir, thank you very much. Downside, upside, Mathur, upside. Okay, very nice. Okay, always interesting. Mr. Gadkari, what do you think she would replace always with? Yes.
I. She should have replaced that I.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so in the interest of time, none of your answers are wrong, because whatever you do will work for you. The word she chose to replace was always. And the word she replaced it with is first. I will first see the downside of everything. So I met her. I used to meet her every month, and 3 months passed. And when I met her the fourth time, I asked her, "How is that pessimist, introverted thing working for you?" She said, "Mukul, is working damn well, you know. Now in my company, they've given me a new nickname. They call me Miss Contingency Plan." You see how it worked, right? She was fond of planning all the time. She would first see the downside and plan for it. Then she would look at the upside and work on that. Right? So literally, whenever things went out of plan, which they do all the time, she had a contingency plan ready. Now, mind you, every other combination would also work. But had she chosen to work on downside, just imagine how much effort will you need to put in if you're used to focusing on the downside and you start focusing on the upside. I mean, the words are so far apart, right? Like mother, mother-in-law. So you can't really move between these two without effort. So the reason I find this story very fascinating, because the person actually leveraged their authentic nature without altering the behavior radically, managed to get radically different results. And this is one of the simplest and finest examples I will give you. In fact, if any one of you want to try it, just ask yourself, what is something which is holding you down? And what's the simplest thing you can do to change that? You might be quite surprised at how things change. So does that give you, sir, an example of the kind of work I do?
Yeah, it does. Now,
And
the next question I have for you is that, see, you have been since 2010. So you have been, like I mentioned in your introduction, that you have been in the United Nations Institute for Training and Research Afghanistan Fellowship. Now, this is basically designed, from what I could gather from the internet, designed for capacity building of the Afghan civil service. And it has been attended by more than 500 Afghans. Now, there are two questions. And these are questions, it's your personal view, without any sort of, getting into this rigmarole of strategy or politics or otherwise. Firstly is that, how do you rate, since you have been into it, how do you rate the caliber of the people who attended this program?
Okay.
Could we have views firstly on this? Then I'll come to the second question.
Okay. So I'm glad you put it like that, because the people who attended this program, the men and women, were truly amazing. If you are aware of what had happened to the civil services in Afghanistan previously when the Taliban had taken over, it had been decimated. So these were very young guys. They were really young guys, and some were so young and they were holding very senior posts, that it was amazing to see the kind of dedication and patriotism they had. They were so keen to rebuild Afghanistan and reclaim governance and put it back on a solid footing, that it was fantastic working with them. I must say, I learned so much about them. And there is one story I will definitely share. This is about a lady I was working with from this cohort. I was amazed to learn that during the peak Taliban regime, she was actually teaching young girl children at night in her house, knowing fully well that if she was caught, she could be killed. And when when they finally were thrown out of power and the Americans had gone in, she set up a school for children who had lost an arm or a leg, any limb due to a landmine or any battle injury. And I had the extreme pleasure of working with someone with this kind of courage. And it was amazing to see how she actually built up a school with just like 1 or 2 kids and brought it to a level where she was looking after 200 children. So this is the kind of people I'm talking about, who had looked death in the eye and still come out firmly on their feet. Okay, so it was fantastic working with them.
Good, very, very reassuring to hear that. And second question, of course, it's now you have said it, so it doesn't actually. But I would like to, if these people are given a chance by the present regime in Kabul. Do you think they will deliver? Because now the country is totally devastated. You see, last time when this time the damage done is far more greater than what I feel than before, because it has been the intelligentsia and all the expertise has actually gone out. So do you think that the present Lord, if that's a big question, because that is not for you and me to decide, but if the Taliban regime decides to, put them in the chair, do you think that they have the resilience and the capacity to deliver?
Well, if there are several parts in that question, it's a very nuanced question. So let me deal with them as best as I can. Will they bring them into governance? I hope they do, because they will definitely benefit. These guys know a lot more about governance than the ruling dispensation, which has taken over, which has been busy with other parts of fighting the war or whatever it is, right? The second part is that what do you think? How will that impact the future? Well, I don't see any downside there. In fact, I'm of the firm belief that every night there is a dawn coming up. And just like, the previous regime passed, this regime should also pass. And if it doesn't, it will eventually stabilize, because in the end, the need of the people for livelihood, for education, for healthcare cannot be denied beyond a point. If you drive any people or population to a point where the fundamental things are not available, there will be a time when they will come up and revolt against you, no matter how powerful you are. We have a lot of examples in history for that. Whether we go back to ancient Russia, we go back to India, it doesn't matter. So I'm pretty confident that at some point in time, these people who were trained, and 500 is a big number, they will be able to do what they were supposed to do. But then I'm an optimist. I always believe that. So yeah.
Now, this question has just come to my mind. That since this program has nothing to do with the so-called infidel America or the NATO forces or the American people, it's a UN program. Do you find yourself as a sort of as a canvasser for this program and trying to put it across to the Taliban through the normal media or otherwise, that these people are available to you? They are trained and they are new, they have been trained under very, very, I would say in a very, without any sort of any ulterior motive. So I am sure that if this sort of, because many people, in fact, to be frank, it was only when I was, looking up your, CV that I found that this program was existing. I was not aware of it. And I'm sure many in the world are not aware, but since this program is actually a beneficial program, could you become, I would say, the brand ambassador for this for this program, to be for the those fellowship people who have done the fellowship, to be given a chance to run to participate in the running of the administration?
So I don't think I will ever be a brand ambassador for anything. Let me give you the politics behind this. I volunteered to help with this program as a mentor and as an executive coach only because I have lived on the other side of the gun and I know what damage it does. So I thought it's time to kind of reclaim some of my karma back. So that's why I volunteered. And we must understand that this program was funded by two organizations. One is the Japanese aid agency called JICA, which is it's probably one of the largest aid agencies in the world. And the second is USAID. So I was literally doing a very minor part of the work in this program. The money came from these two organizations. The will came from the United Nations and the Afghanistan Civil Services College. So I don't see myself doing anything more with this. I believe I did what I had to do. Yeah.
I think that's a good, straightforward and a forthright answer. And I do appreciate your candidness on this account. So now we come to our third part, which is should be the most interesting, in the sense that it is we are now talking to Mukul, the writer. And here I have certain questions, which I would again request you to, if you could add in the certain other details, if they are, which you may not have mentioned in the book because of, to avoid repetition or verbosity. So, you see, my first question to you is that, you see, you have earned several impressive sobriquets, such as, India's literary stormtrooper, or the India's Tom Clancy, or India's #1 thrill machine. And what I could find in your books is that your sort of strong point is that you have got a knack of taking up very, very complex plots, which have a very high degree of plausibility. And so you have to keep reminding yourself that you are reading fiction. Now, my question is that how are you able to weave together so many, seemingly unrelated subplots and come out with a narration that is extremely compelling?
Again, so I must say that you have this habit of asking very difficult questions, and they are very nuanced. Let me attempt to break it down and answer it. Firstly, why did I start writing? I think that one is easy to answer because all of us love stories. I have never met a human being who doesn't love stories, whether listening to them or telling them. So I do too. The second reason is why did I choose to write about whatever it is that I wrote about? Most of my books were products of extreme anger. For example, I was in Delhi when the Sarojini Nagar blast happened. I watched in horror as the government failed to respond. There's something amazing about our governments. They failed to respond to China coming in, Pakistan coming. Everyone is literally happy hours. People come and go as they come and please. And I was horrified at the lack of response, knowing fully well what the Indian armed forces are capable of, if the political will is there. So I decided, okay, so I cannot do anything about it. Let me write a book about it. Now, then when I started writing a book, a very funny thing happened. I met a publisher, and by then I had a couple of books already out. So finding a publisher was not a major challenge. And I met a publisher and I told him that I'm planning to do military action thrillers based on terrorism. The first response I got was that, bro, Indians don't do military action thrillers. Tom Clancy does military action. So I looked at him, I said, what do you think the Mahabharata was? It was a military action thriller. It had everything, sex, violence, everything in it, So I said, I still went ahead and wrote the book. And so Lashkar was born purely as a matter of anger, where I felt the need to express what could have happened. Now, when it came to what could have happened and this part about Nostradamus, so I must point out this thing about the media giving you all these fancy titles and names. As a writer, I think it is important we do not take it seriously. We are only as good as the last book we have written. This is one lesson I learned after my 8th or 9th book, that you are only as good as the last book you have written because no one remembers anything beyond that. So I would put aside these sobriquets. They do not make any difference to me. I literally focused on writing what I thought was a good book. When I was halfway through Lashkar, I realized that there was no way that I could deal with a topic as complex as terrorism with one book. So I expanded it to a 4-book series. Now, why did I manage to stay literally on the edge of reality? Because everything I have written is plausible or has happened in some form or the other. And I'll quote for you one example, which is not there in any of the books. In a subsequent book, I think it was it was Assassins, where I had described the killing of a politician, which is patterned on Benazir Bhutto. The funny thing is that I wrote about the killing before it happened. And my publisher called me and she said, Mukul, you realize that how horrifying this is, whatever you have written. And she was reading the manuscript when the news came out on television, when literally it was almost as though they had picked up my book and followed it to the T. So now, why did that happen? Because look, most of these operations, whether it was Mumbai, the attack on Mumbai, they were planned by military officers. Military planning is very precise. There is a plan, there are contingencies, there are sub-plans. So any military officer who would have planned those operations would have planned them the way I planned them. Whether it was the strike in Pakistan to take out a criminal who was patterned on a particular criminal, or to take out a brigadier who was actually there in the forces in the Pakistan army and spearheading operations against India, it was a no-brainer. So I think what worked for me was solid research. I do research a lot. I mean, to give you an example, in Salim Must Die, which came out almost 1.5 years before the killing of Osama, if you read the book, you read the helicopters which went in, you look at the route which they followed, the fact that one of the American helicopters was shot down. If you have seen the movie Zero Dark 30, it was almost a lifted blueprint of Salim Must Die. That military raid was executed exactly the way I described it. And again, no rocket science. It was research, military thinking, and a study of history. It had to happen. It had to happen. The Americans had known about him years back, but they needed to time it in a way that it would shift the elections, because it was timed 6 to 8 months before the American elections, which is enough time to spin the story if the raid went bad, or enough time to milk the story if the raid went good. So again, it wasn't rocket science. Most good writing, I would say, and I'm not saying my writing is good, I think it's brilliant, but most good writing is based on research and a study of history. Did that kind of answer your fairly nuanced question?
I do understand. That's a very, you have put it across very simplistically. But I would say that, there are certain things like one of our viewers has just asked a question, which comes that, you have said that I would not say implied, but you have suggested that army operations are predictable. That is why once you have thought from the army point of view, you were able to foresee what actually happened much later. So what do you have to say on this? Because since it's connected, I would like to finish it off this thing here only.
Absolutely. So look, if I had to attack a city like Mumbai, I would literally use the swarm technique, which is what they did. Right? I mean, and this technique was described by me in another book, which is called, but the American edition was called Weapon of Vengeance. I forgot what the Indian edition was called. But where Palestinian terrorists attacked Jerusalem, they again used the swarm, because that's how you would operate against a superior force in terms of training and numbers and weaponry. You would send in people who would split out and force you to split your response. So that was again no rocket science. What route they would take to reach Mumbai, I mean, how hard is that to figure out? Literally, how hard is it to figure out, right? So if we had to go into Pakistan to take out, say, a Dawood Ibrahim or anyone like that, I mean, is it really rocket science? This is exactly the way you would do it. You would not send in a battalion. You would send in 1 or 2 people who are ready to die, or you would hire 1 or 2 guns who would go in and do what needs to be done, right? So again, no rocket science there. If you look at another of my books, Assassins, where, okay, so by the time I had come to Assassins, it's very interesting because, in action thrillers, right, the bar is always against the writer, because there are only a few ways to kill people. With a knife, you can either stab or slash. With a gun, you can just shoot them, right? With poison, you either inject it or ingest it. So what do you do? So you have to become more creative, which is why in Assassins, I actually used poison gas. And it was delivered fairly intelligently, I must say. So it became very hard to predict it and then to stop it. So military actions are easy to plan, but we must also remember that most military officers who are smart will not do what you expect them to do. So they will understand what you expect them to do and then create enough variations so that you are playing catch up. And that's kind of what I did in the book, right? In any of the books.
I do agree. It's a good sort of insight you've given us. But still, Mukul, I still have got this point. Though you try to, avoid discussing this issue, but yes, I agree with you that, you see, there are ways of doing a thing. There's what we call in the army appreciation, or looking at something from the enemy's viewpoint or the target's viewpoint. But tell me, everything is fine otherwise. But you tell me, what gave you the gut feeling that Osama bin Laden was holed up in Pakistan? That is something which is, see, because I have also been of sorts reading or otherwise, or speculating. I also like to speculate a lot. But this is something which has never, this never came. I could never come so close as to say that or imagine that he could be actually sitting in the heart of Pakistan in Abbottabad.
So actually, in Salim Must Die, I even described his location and the color of the walls of the house he was living in, and that was not guesswork. You see, just after the raid happened, and this is not the first time I've been asked this question, a couple of journalists from the US called me, and I will not name the papers or anything, but they called me to ask me how did I know. And my counter question to them was, who did not know? I asked them, I should call up your CIA director and ask him who did not know about this. I mean, how does the most wanted face on the planet suddenly vanish? Cannot, right? Someone has to be hiding him. Now, sir, I'll ask you this. If I gave you a person to hide, where would you hide him? I would hide him in plain sight, right outside a military academy where I could keep my eye on him. Right outside in an area where I have enough reason to sanitize the area if I wish to. So it was no rocket science. Okay, I could not tell you whether it was outside this training academy or that training academy, but it was pretty certain it was one of them. How did I know? I spoke to many people, hundreds of people. Whenever I do research, I'll give you one example of how thorough the research can get. For this book, Weapon of Vengeance, my primary character is a 28, 29-year-old girl, half British, half Indian, brought up in Palestine. Sorry, half Palestinian, half Indian, brought up in UK. Now, I'm not a girl, as you must have noticed. I'm not 28. I was a long time back. I'm not 28. I have no idea how they think. So my publisher read the book. She returned it to me saying that, Mukul, you have told me what the character does. You haven't told me why she does it. I had no clue, right? So what do I do when I have no clue? Most times in my life, I realize I've done well in areas I have no clue, because then I go to find out. So I interviewed over 100 people, girls who were either 28, brought up in UK, or half Palestinian or half Indian or full Palestinian, full Indian. And I started putting together the thinking of such a person. So that's why I always say that, look, it's not rocket science, it's research. And I'm not being modest or anything. Trust me on this, sir. My mummy told me you have very little to be modest about. So I'm not being modest, but I'm telling you something very factual. You research well, you cannot go wrong.
So that's fair enough. I think good, convincing reply, I would say. Again, very, very plausible and compelling.
Sir, I have nothing to hide, by the way.
Now, I wanted to ask you a question. You have, besides writing on various issues, you have written a book, The Garuda Strikes. And it's a very widely acclaimed piece of military writing. My question is that why did you, or what motivated you to pick up an issue of a battalion, 4 guards, 1 Rajput to be precise, to be more precise. The actions they, fought during 1971 war, about which very little is known beyond the military service.
Great question, sir. So, in fact, it is without any exception, it is my favorite book, and there's a reason for it, which I will just build on. I'm sure you guys would have heard of General Himmat Singh. He was the commanding officer of 4 guards when they went into Bangladesh. He had passed on, but his widow, Mrs. Jane Himmat Singh, contacted me and she said, Mukul, I want you to write a book on the story of that battalion in this battle, because the people who took part are there and they will not be around much longer. It's an amazing story to be told. Now, this is not the first time I've been approached by military units asking me to do that. Like I think I mentioned to you, sir, Sikalai, hum log bade padhe likhe hote hain. So when they need to write a book, they come to us, right? So she asked me to write the book, and the reason I agreed is because she said that we will be using the proceeds of the book for the war widows and the orphans. So the proceeds of this book, I use 70% for them, and 30% is at my discretion. I use it for my own regiment in ways I will not want to go into. But the reason I wrote this book is true. There was an amazing story there, and I have interviewed these people personally, the stories they shared, and most importantly, the simple manner in which they tell you about amazing deeds. It literally, even though I have been into combat, I was amazed at the sheer courage of these men. And I mean men of all ranks, right from jawans to officers. So that's the reason I wrote the book, and because the money is being used for the war widows and the orphans, and it's an amazing story. I mean, if you that is one book I would urge you to buy and read. If you buy, you benefit some war widow, and if you read, you will be amazed at the courage of these people. A few good men and what all they achieved. So does that answer your question, sir?
It does. It does. Now, one of my questions is that you see, you have written a book called RIP, which in which for our viewers who have not read it, it's a group of former army officers who are determined to rid the country of corruption by targeting those who are indulging in it. That is, or promoting it. That is, the politicians, bureaucrats, judiciary. Now, Mukul, if you don't mind, the theme of this book, what I found is most I would say improbable from the point of view of reality or it happening. So that is why I wanted to know that when you wrote, but I was surprised that this is perhaps, I may be wrong, perhaps one of the most reviewed books of yours. I wonder if it is one of your top sellers also. Could you explain this, a story which is on the right from the page 1, or when you read, it is you keep telling yourself, yeah, this can't happen, but yet you can't leave the book. At the same time, you find that this book carries on and on and on, and in a very exciting way. So can we have something about this book? What has made this book? Firstly, what made you write the book? And secondly, what makes this book so popular?
Right. So you are right. It is one of my most reviewed books. And in the first month alone, there were like 200 of them, reviews, I mean. And why did I write the book? This book again was a product of my anger. At my anger and my frustration at what the country was and even now is going through. I mean, no one in this room here can say they are apolitical. If you're living in a society, you are definitely political, because every political decision impacts each one of us at every single level. It's not just the price of petrol or anything. Everything impacts us. So I wrote it because I was extremely angry and frustrated. Now, that's the one part. The second part is it possible? No, it isn't. I certainly hope army officers do not decide to go rogue and start shooting down politicians, despite the strong compulsion to do so, which I'm sure a lot of us often feel. But I don't think it's possible. But strangely enough, a lot of my readers wrote in to say that they wish it would happen. And that was what I was talking about. I was frustrated. I was angry as to why is it that we educated people, the middle classes, which is such a huge number, at least in those days, it was such a huge number. Why is it that we cannot find 580 odd honest people, not even 580, chaliye, 400 of them, honest people to sit down in those hollowed halls and make laws which benefit the common man? That's why I wrote the book. And yes, there was one other reason. I want people to understand there are no good people. There are people who do good things. There are people who do bad things. Look at all of us, right? All of us. Are we good? Are we bad? No. Depends on what we are doing at that point in time. Whatever we do, sometimes we do good, sometimes we do bad. So even though these guys in the book were fictional characters, the stuff they did had good intentions, but was very illegally done. So that's kind of my summary on the book, that these are a group of 6 army officers who are frustrated and decide that they will gun down one person every day till certain actions are taken by the government to curb corruption. So that's a book. I wish one day something like this would happen. although I don't like to see people die, but I would love to see corruption being thrown out of the window. I'm sure everyone here wants to see a clean governance in place.
That's good. Yeah. Okay, Mukul, when do we expect your next novel? And if it is not, again, taking away or stealing the thunder, could we have a general idea about what we could expect or what would be the theme?
Okay. Well, it's a nice question, sir. I have 3 books coming up. The first one is One Night Stand. It was a very tough book to write because the book is based in 6 hours. The entire story, a full-length novel, is based in 6 hours. It's about a murder which takes place in a nightclub and how the whole story unravels. So that's One Night Stand. The book is ready. It is getting into production very shortly. The second book I have actually finished it, but I'm kind of unhappy with it. It's called The Good Die Young. Again, it's a thriller, and I will be redoing parts of it till I'm happy. The third book is another thriller based in Europe called The Girl from Gothenburg, which is a city in Sweden. And this is probably the most complex and big canvas book I have ever attempted. I plan to complete it by 2023. Essentially, just to give you a brief idea, it's about a terror plot by the ISIS, whatever name you might like to give that organization in the way it keeps changing colors, in Europe, and how that plot is unfolding. And the central point is this girl from Gothenburg. So that's why the title.
Good. I think it's been a very good interaction. Now, the last question from my side is that what tips would you like to give to people who are aspiring to be writers?
Just write. I mean, look at me. Essentially, 10th pass. I can write. Why anyone can write? Writing is see, something which we don't understand is writers don't write books. We write manuscripts, and just like behind us is a whole army of people that I will always say that my books had not been half whatever they are if I did not have such amazing editorial support. Whether it was HarperCollins, Penguin, Westland, or Macmillan US, I had amazing editorial support. They took my manuscripts and they polished them and they made them into sleek, fast-moving books. So anyone who wants to write, just sit down and write. There's no downside. The best is your handwriting can improve and your grammar can improve, and maybe you might also get published. But there is definitely no downside in writing. Yeah. So that's the only tip I can give you. That's what I did. In fact, okay. I must take this moment to just say one thing. A lot of people ask me this question. And they give me all these fancy titles, which I kind of don't really like. But at the heart of it, I have 2 strengths, and I believe each one of us have them. They are the core of what I call my live limitless philosophy. The first is, it is important for us human beings to know that we do not know anything. That our ideas are basically like our children. We think they are the best, but they are just ideas. Right? And the second thing is to understand that the day you lose your fear of failure, I have no fear of failure. The day you lose your fear of failure, you are invincible. Because you will literally, if you believe you do not know, you will go to find out. We do not ask enough questions. We do not listen enough. So learn to listen, and then remember, failure will always teach you to come out a better person. So I have no fear of failure, and that is my ultimate strength. I know I don't know anything, and I have no fear of failure. And I believe that these are the 2 things which every human being needs to be able to live completely limitlessly. That's it from my side, sir. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you. It's been a very, educative and enjoyable interaction, Mukul. That's great. And the beauty is that the person who taught you English also taught me the same subject. God bless his soul. And now I hand you over to Major General Hemant to if there are any questions for the question answer sessions, if there are any.
There is a question from Colonel Sidhu, which is there in the chat box.
I
by
see
the
it.
time,
I see the question.
It's about the 6th sense.
I think it's a great question. So for those of you who are not reading, who have not read the question, it's about how important the 6th sense in success in business, and how can we operationalize it. So let me pull you back to what I just talked about, my philosophy of living limitless. So please understand that human beings are born with something very amazing. It's called instinctive alignment. All of us have it. Each one of us. When we set out to do something, we instinctively know what will work, what will not. And every single time when you deny your instinct, you will most probably fail. So I would say knowing and trusting your instinct is a good idea. I wonder whether, Mr. Sidhu, that answers your question, Colonel Sidhu, sir.
Okay.
But that's what I believe. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. It has been absolutely brilliant listening to you for almost last 1 hour. I
Thank
will
you, sir.
just say a few points. Colonel Rakesh Sidhu, who's from Mechanized Infantry, has just written 2 books. One is on China, something on Dragon, and one is Success Through Madness. And we have a session on that on 31st October, how the veterans who have achieved success through madness in different fields. You would have definitely qualified for that, but we had a separate session for you. Now, your next book, you said, is coming in 2023. And
No,
we
sir,
have planned
that's my 3rd book, sir. I should have a book out very soon, sir.
Okay, so your next book is 2023. We have to plan for that one also. Just sharing, you must have heard of Rick Atkinson,
Sir.
the Pulitzer Prize author. I spoke to him. So he is also finishing his book in 2023. So he said, I will appear on 2023 on your show. I will that time request you to interact with him.
Inshallah, sir. If I'm around, I will.
On the lighter side, then one person answered correctly who used the word always. That is Nitin Gadkari. Actually, he's Major General Nitin Gadkari.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, sir.
And he has also written a thriller, which is called Oscar Tango. And he's also working on his next thriller. Apart from being he's a very good painter, and he was part of the services cricket team. So he's on our show on the 7th when we talk of some other thrillers along with some other person.
Very nice.
But so candid, and we have picked up so many things. We are late at the age of 60 and 65. But many youngsters who would be seeing this, they will be carrying home so many points. So we are elated. Your passion is amazing. Your clarity is amazing. And your smile is amazing. Your shine is amazing. And behind that, I think when you are angry, you end up doing something good if you can harness it well. So beautifully put across, Mukul. We are very happy, and we'll say 3 cheers to you before we go and hit the bar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you, Nilesh.
Thank you, Mukul. It's been great.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
sir.
Hemant.
And again, for the audience, thank you so much for having me over and for patiently listening to all my ramblings. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Hemant. Thank you very much.
You weaved it very well.
Thanks.
And with that, everybody, we will end our sessions, 2 sessions, back-to-back sessions today. And we will hope to see you on 10th October when we talk about 2 very interesting books on 1962, which have not been heard about earlier. And then thereafter on 16th and 17th October. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Rana sir, for attending.